Hello, I'm Kimberly Dondo, Digital Content Manager, and welcome to In Conversation With, the podcast series that delves into the world of financial services and brings you face-to-face with some of the most notable figures in the industry. Listen as we discuss topics that are currently facing the industry and hear from visionary CEOs to disruptive innovators as we bring you a diverse array of voices and perspectives. We'll explore the challenges they faced, the lessons they've learned, and the insights they have to share about the ever-evolving landscape of financial services.
Hi, I'm Lois Valley, Chief Reporter for Money Marketing, and on this episode of our podcast, I'm joined by Rob Schwartz, Rob Bell and Scott Millar, who are the three founders of a fairly new advice business called Finova Money, which I believe has just celebrated its first anniversary. So congratulations, guys, and thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be here, Lois. Thank you for having us.
Great. So how's your first year been then, as you've just reached that marker?
Year one has been good. It's been a year of learning and adapting and changing to this wonderful world of being self-employed. None of us have been in that position before, so we left the previous firm the three of us were at back in May 2023. Spent the first few months throughout last summer really nailing down the type of business we wanted to create. And that, was all around the culture, our values, ethos, investment proposition, how we price our services, all of those sort of things that once the blinkers were off, we were able to have a really insightful kind of few months of really building the business and how we wanted it to look and feel with our future clients. So that was summer 2023. We then launched properly in September time, which is when we could officially start taking clients on once we were authorized and signed off by the FCA and SENS, the network we chose to be a part of. And then since then, it's been really, refining that service and working with clients. We've been, I guess, pretty happy with progress in terms of the number of clients we're now working with, the number of referrals we've consistently been getting, which is brilliant. No complaints. We're still here. We are still here. We've made amendments as we've gone along from where we thought we would be to where we are now. So, constantly adapting and changing, but making improvements all the while. And hit end of year one at the end of May. They've just gone, and looking forward to the next 12 months.
Lovely. Perfect. So we are obviously going to talk more about Finova Money, but before we do that, maybe for the benefit of any listeners who may not know you guys, could you just each introduce yourselves and just say a little bit about, maybe talk to us about why you entered the advice profession in the first place? So should we start with, let's start with Scott, as Rob Schwartz has just been talking.
Thanks, Lois. Yeah, so I'm Scott. I'm obviously one of the founders of Finova Money. This is going to be really cliche, isn't it? But I fell into financial planning as everybody else does. I guess this is one of the reasons that we're trying to create a business that hopefully attracts new talent to the profession. It's one thing that all three of us are pretty passionate about, to make sure this becomes an actual choice and not just, we stumbled across it. So no, I did stumble across it. I worked at a firm in London that looked after expats that came back to the UK. It's actually where I first met Rob Schwartz. So Rob and I worked together there, and then we ended up working all together again at First Wealth, which was the firm we were at before, which is really probably where we would all agree that we did our learning development, how to do this job properly, how to actually deliver proper financial planning advice and so forth. And then here we are. We decided to make that leap probably 5-6 years we were at First Wealth, and then decided now was the right time for us to try and do this for ourselves. Had our own ideas on how we wanted to set up the business, how we want to charge for that service, how we want to serve clients. So that's it's a very quick run through of how I got into the profession.
No, that's great. Thank you. Should we go Rob Bell next? What made you want to join the advice profession?
Yeah, so I joined, again, randomly, fell into it. My background was actually chemistry. So did a chemistry degree, 4 years, then went travelling, and you realise after 2 or 3 years away, your degree is worth a lot less than you thought it might have been if you'd gone straight into work. So started looking, nearly went into accountancy, but a friend of mine who was an accountant said, I probably wouldn't enjoy it, less client time. And he kind of suggested I look elsewhere. ended up speaking to a firm up in the city, and a bit more salesy. Some good advisors there, but it was very much a kind of old school cold calling. Not exactly what my kind of comfort levels were at the time. Didn't really know anything about financial planning, so it took me a bit of time to get used to it. And then from there, again, I progressed through a couple of businesses, and First Wealth was where we were, and that's where I learned to properly give advice. Really enjoyed the time there, but I think you start to realise what's important to you and what you want to do over the long term. And I think Finova Money's given us the opportunity to really work out how we want to kind of grow our career and this business we've started.
Great. And last but not least, Rob Schwartz.
Absolutely. First job out of uni was selling plugs and sockets. I was at an electrical wholesale business, and I was there for about a year, and then I randomly got a cold call from an overseas advice business that was looking for salespeople to go overseas and work in some of their offshore offices and advise expats on products, investments, pensions, that sort of stuff. So in a couple of months, I made the decision to move out to Zurich in Switzerland, which is where I was for a couple of years. Enjoyed the job, which was cold calling essentially. Learned how to deal with rejection and how to kind of get on a level with people over the phone, which was a good career builder, I suppose. Moved back to the UK a couple of years after that. Met Scott in the UK office, and then like the boys have said, moved on to First Wealth, and here we are. So like Scott and Rob, arguably, fell into the industry, but then learned that the profession is totally different from what we probably our first experiences were.
Great. So I am interested to know, just obviously you're the three co-founders of Finova Money. How do your roles differ within the business? Like what are your specific roles? I will ask Rob Bell first.
So I'm primarily focused on advice proposition. It's making sure that everything behind the scenes works. We all sit in front of clients. We all work with clients, and we've got our own kind of groups that we work with. But outside of that, it's the proposition, making sure that from a compliance perspective, everything that needs to be in place is in place. So right. the kind of the fun stuff.
Scott, what about you?
It's a good question. As Rob said, we're all. I think you end up at the start. This is the other thing. I think we're starting to naturally find our roles. I think that when you first set up, you're sort of like, okay, who wants to do this part? Who wants to do that part? Who's best placed to do that part? We're always, like Rob says, we're all sitting in front of clients. That's still the bit that we all enjoy the most from day to day. In terms of the business side of stuff, I probably swoop in and out of helping Rob sometimes with the advice proposition and so forth. More on I'm sure Rob and Rob will agree, I'm fairly OCD. So I probably mostly on for keeping us on track, making sure that we're actually hitting some of the deadlines and the things that we've set out. And hopefully we're all involved in the long-term planning of the business. What do we want it to look like? Where are some of the value adds? What's the best way we want to serve our clients? And equally, it's slightly off tangent, but it's one of the things we wanted to do when we set up was not just focus on financial planning. And what I mean by that is that we're in a profession which obviously has lots of great businesses in it, but financial planning profession is not just the best businesses for how to run a business. And we want to learn from other professions on how they serve their clients. And therefore, how do we implement some of that in the way that we want to help our clients? So it's all of us are really keeping on the sort of that overarching high level, long-term strategy, but sitting in front of clients predominantly is the day to day.
And Rob Schwartz?
I'm different from the other two. This is what we've quickly realised over the last year as well, is that when you start the business and everyone has to muck in, there are bits that maybe you naturally sway away from or gravitate towards. And for me, the bit that I missed the most last summer was being in front of clients. And we obviously weren't able to do that between May and sort of September time when we could get out there once we were signed off. So for me, the role is evolving now more into that, I guess, the growth role, which is more around client acquisition, retention, the sort of primary focus on client service and what that looks like. And yeah, I definitely feel like I've got my mojo back that I lost throughout last summer when that was taken away from me. And then actually the building of the business, which I think fair to say the boys were picked up a lot more easily than I did, were, I struggled with that. Didn't come as easily to me as it did the other two, I don't think. And but look, a year in, I think it's been a brilliant education for us to learn more about each other and how we are different as individuals. And that's a really great cocktail that we've got to be able to sit here as a trio to say we've probably got all bases covered from as what you would want in management. We've got, Scott potentially in that sort of CEO role. We've got Rob in the sort of ops or, compliance tech kind of role. And then you've maybe got myself on the client side or growth officer or whatever you want to call that. So, from a standpoint, I don't think I would be able to, I wouldn't be here made as much progress as we have done as a trio without the other two. So yeah, I think even the one bit of advice I'd say to anyone thinking of starting out their own firm is just make sure that you've got skills, across all sectors of the business of what you're going to be doing, because it's really important to have that. And if there's any weaknesses, it's great to kind of plug it with other talent that we've been able to as well.
Brilliant. Rob, that was going to be my last question. You answered it already. So no, it's fine. I was just going to ask, so all three of you are still advising as well as running the business, is that right? How is that? How are you finding the balance between, because they're very different skills, aren't they, advising clients? And presumably you got into advice because you enjoy advising clients. So how are you finding the balance between running the business and advising clients at the same time? Scott, I'll ask you first.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's something I initially have struggled with, and I think it largely comes down to, as dull as it sounds, managing your time, being very intentional with set days for, okay, this is where I'm allocating my time for this day, this is where I'm allocating my time for this day, and trying not to be swayed on that. I probably don't take my own advice, and I probably flit it between them as more than I should. But I think it's just being intentional with where you're spending your time. And actually, as Rob rightly pointed out, I've actually quite enjoyed the business side of stuff and growing that. And actually, then you come back and do the day job and you realize, actually, I really enjoy that part. So I don't particularly want to give up either part just yet. And I think the way we've set up the business as well, with maybe some of the tech we're using or looking to use, and the way we're trying to set up processes and systems, which we thought would work one way, and now we're having to refine and adapt them as things change. That's allowed us to probably not have to give up so much time in front of clients, as Rob again rightly said. That's the bit we enjoy. That's why we set up and why we want to give advice. We don't want to take away from that part, but if we can enhance how we deliver that advice, allow us to have more time in front of clients, that's how we're setting the business up. So it's probably how we've been able to manage that nicely at the moment.
Rob Bell, have you got anything to add? Any pieces of advice for someone wanting to run a business and advise clients at the same time?
Yeah, so I think we've not followed the status quo with how we've set up the business. Obviously, the biggest difference is going fixed fee and trying to be very prescriptive over the services we can offer, and making sure that clients have a service offering that fits their circumstance. What we've found is, as you start to speak to clients, they will have feedback. They will have thoughts on how it works. You'll also see what parts work, what parts don't work. And it's been a kind of learning curve to make sure that we're taking that on board, discussing it. Is Rob experiencing the same? Is Scott experiencing the same? And where that's the case, we can actually then change our services and the proposition to make sure that we're actually delivering something that really works for those clients, rather than just a pigeonhole where this is where you have to go. It's trying to actually make a service that does work for the people we're designing it for. And I think that's been, I've absolutely loved that part of the role. It's been really, really good. It's problem solving. It's kind of working out where people have pain points and then trying to find a solution that we can offer that gives us the flexibility to fix that for them.
Great. And Rob Schwartz, any additional points?
I think I'm speaking back on what Rob Bell just said there, is that, it's with that, the beauty of being a brand new business is that you don't have any kind of preset or legacy requirements or processes and procedures that you have to kind of, break out of. So I think anyone starting out, it would be it's been an exciting time for us to be able to say, okay, so what we did before was good, but what can we do now? Now the shackles are off. Now our blinkers are off. What is out there? Let's go and explore. Let's go and be curious about what's out there. Let's go and find the best possible solution and build. And if it's not available, let's go and build it. Let's work on that and hustle and make sure that we can offer something that, we can be really proud of. And, I think that as a brand new business has been a really exciting journey, and there's been multiple iterations of it, and that will continue as well. So I think that the value of of having that time to think throughout summer to really go out and explore and look at what's available has helped us massively to create what we have now.
Great. And I am just interested in why you went the appointed representative route, and also why you chose to join Sense Network. Were there any specific things you liked about that? Would you ever consider going directly authorised in the future, or is that not really something you're looking at doing? I don't really mind who answers. Scott?
Yeah, no, in answer to the first question, the reason that we went as an appointed rep was speed of getting set up and cost. Again, we want to be as transparent as possible. I think when we looked at both options, we just felt for us the time frame in which we had to set up the business or wanted to set up the business. Again, one of the advice that I wrote about this the other day on LinkedIn, actually, one of the things you need to actually think about practically when you're setting up a business is, what's my runway? How long can I actually not have an income for in order for me to get this set up? And obviously, one of the things we therefore needed to take into account was, with three of us, how long was that runway looking like? And actually getting set up with an AR for the speed of that process was really sort of lent itself to the decision for us. And the reason we chose Sense, we came from a network previously, and one of the things we found with Sense was that they felt slightly more forward thinking. They allowed us to have a complete free reign on the proposition, provided we could justify it. So there wasn't any predetermined, you have to use this provider and so forth. So we, as Rob rightly pointed out, we were fortunate where we had a blank sheet of paper to go, okay, well, we now know roughly how to run a business. Okay, and the processes look like for giving advice, but how do we slot in the providers, the tech and so forth that we want to make our life easier? So that's the sort of first indication of that. In answer to your second question, directly authorized, yes. I think longer term, that is, at the moment, our feelings is that is probably where we want to go. We're not sure. It depends on multiple factors. It depends a lot on where regulation goes as well, and consumer duty, that lovely word. So yes, it's something we're going to explore, but it's not sort of certain that that's what we're going to do.
Cool. And what are some of your other, so you've obviously reached the first year point. What are some of your plans for the next year, Rob, Bell?
So next year is going to be about continuing to grow. I think that's going to be our kind of primary focus. Start working with as many clients as we can, grow the business. They'll probably start taking on a bit of a team. I think there's only so many hours in the day that we can allocate towards this, and just to kind of give the business the best foundations we can. I think it'll be adding one, if not two people towards the next 12-month period. They're the main objectives. We've got a few kind of projects going in the background. We're going to see how they go. If it works, keep doing it, build it. If it doesn't, cut it. It's obviously we need to focus on where we're kind of driving the business from. So and it's just keep improving. We've set out from the beginning, it was going to be consistent progress. Make sure we're doing what's right for us, what's right for our clients, and we can stand on our morals. So I think that's a good overview of what the next 12 months will be for us.
Exciting. Rob Schwartz, I wanted to sort of widen out and look a bit more at sort of some of the key challenges for financial planners today, or key trends that we're seeing in the planning advice space. Speaking of, I see you post on LinkedIn a few times about the term planners versus the term advisors. And I just wondered if you could give us a bit of an insight into your thoughts on that. Do you think your profession is more planning or advice, and why? Like, what's the better term for what you do?
Yeah, good question. I think it can be really confusing for consumers. I think it can be really confusing for new starters in the profession. We have different terms, right? Planner, advisor, wealth manager, IFA, restricted advisor, like all of these different things. So I think what it boils down to really is what's the sort of relationship that you want to have with your clients, but also what does your firm want to be known for? So for us, it's about forging sort of lifelong relationships with clients and their families, to give them massive value in whatever pursuits they have in their life, right? And I think for us, in order to do that, it goes beyond managing money. Yeah, so I think managing money is almost the easy bit in what we do. That's almost solved now in terms of the investment proposition, largely evidence-based portfolios tilted towards equities and bond, primarily more equities on low-cost platforms that are safe and secure with some tax planning around it. So that piece is kind of like solved. The bit that we found when we were working at the previous firm was that where clients had got most value was where you were sitting down and being pragmatic with the actual planning. And that's where you're helping clients to identify their objectives and then really working with them to bring whatever it is they want to bring, to reality. And of course, investments are going to play a part of that, pensions, ISAs, and all the rest of it. But without having a plan, it's sort of, what are you doing this for? So not only does it make it a more interesting conversation for us, it makes the job more enjoyable. You can actually then kind of hang your hat on that as a massive value add for clients. I've had clients of mine that said, you know what, we don't necessarily mind if the investments aren't as good as they could be, right? Actually, what you're helping us with, it goes beyond that. What you're helping us with is knowing when work can become a choice rather than a necessity, knowing when I can spend more time with my family, knowing can we afford that next house that we want to buy, knowing what to do with all these complex share schemes and stuff that we've got at work. And for me, that is where, we can really kind of put our mark in the sand and say, this is the sort of business that if I was a client, I would want to go and work with. And also if I was looking into the industry and the profession and looking as what sort of career do I want to be building? Do I want to be building one where I go and pick investments for clients, or do I want to pick one where I'm going and I'm building these lifelong relationships with clients who, I'm getting involved in their lives and I'm the go-to person in their life when they've got these really key, important decisions to be making. So yeah, for me, it felt like the term financial advisor is way more prescriptive. Whereas planning is, I think I mentioned this before, is way more collaborative, it's more enjoyable, it's more getting on a level with clients and genuinely helping them through tough decisions that they've got to make. So proud to be a planner.
Great. And you mentioned there about, and Scott, you said at the beginning as well about when you were talking about how you got into advice, how we can make the profession more attractive to people so they actually choose to go into advice rather than fall into it. As you said, I always hear that nearly every interview I've done, people have said, oh, I fell into financial services. And I certainly know when I was at school about 15 years ago, it wasn't a career that came up as that. It was always, lawyers, doctors, journalists, even accountants, and financial advice never really came up as a potential career option. What do you think the profession as a whole can do to attract more, not necessarily younger, although preferably younger advisors into the profession? Scott, I'll ask you, as you mentioned it at the beginning.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of facets to it. The first is we always talk about this advice gap and not having enough advisors and so forth. I think the problem is it starts even earlier. We always talk about, okay, how do we get more people in? Well, that needs to start an education phase around not necessarily teaching kids about finances and so forth, but going in and saying, look, this is a genuine career choice on the same standards as law and accountancy. We probably, all three of us, agree that actually being a financial planner is more privileged than being a lawyer and accountant, because people actually quite like to come and see us and choose to work with us. You have to appoint an accountant or you have to see a solicitor, which usually means that something's up, or obviously doing general tax and so forth. So I think it starts slightly earlier. I think having better career paths in, one of the big things that we see a lot is there's a lot of self-employed roles. In actual fact, when you're starting out, I just don't think self-employed is a feasible option, especially nowadays. And my cynical view is I think that comes from a short-term view from the people at the top, that the most important thing is revenue rather than longevity. And one of the things that we do want to do is to create a clear pathway for people to come through within Finova Money, but not necessarily have to have just the one route to advice. Advice is one great part of it, but I actually think with the way the profession's going, paraplanners are probably going to become extremely valuable. Maybe even I'd quite like to change the name paraplanner to something else. It feels kind of restricted, but I just think these academy structures that you're seeing, a lot of infighting in financial planning as well. I think sometimes it's good to call out bad practice, and it's good to challenge the status quo and things like that. But I don't think it's very difficult for a new entrant to the profession to decide, oh, if I do this route or this route or this route or this route, I'm going to upset someone, and someone's going to tell me I'm wrong. So I think there needs some clarity on what is a route to get into the profession, but also education needs to come in further ahead.
Yeah, definitely. So people know it's actually a career before they're even thinking about careers. Another massive thing for advisors at the moment, because I'm hearing it at most conferences that I'm attending, or most people I'm speaking to mention it, is obviously artificial intelligence and how it can help advisors. Rob Bell, as you're on the operations side, I'm going to ask you what your thoughts are generally on artificial intelligence, and also whether Finova Money is using AI, and if so, what for?
Yeah, so big hot topic at the moment. So I think everywhere you look, it's AI. We are using it. I think it's what we're noticing is a lot of new technologies coming out. Every month, something new's coming out. So whereas there were only one or two kind of standout businesses 6 months ago, we're seeing new entrants consistently, and they're all trying to solve different problems. So it actually gets quite confusing with what's each tool going to be able to offer you. And we've took an overall view on this, is what we need from technology in general, whether it's AI or whether it's just the belt and braces CRM behind the scenes, is it's got to be able to talk to each other. So as most of the tools we want to use, we want them to be able to communicate, because there's no point having something which can do a fantastic job in one corner of your business, and then you need to go away and start to transcribe from one document into another document. It's a complete waste of time. So we're really keen to find tools that allow us to save time. The best one we've got at the moment is probably Saturn. So it joins our calls, it transcribes everything, and then it analyzes those conversations we've had with the clients. It means we can fully focus on the conversations. And as long as you check it reasonably quickly after the meeting, you can easily 90+% accuracy. So really, really has helped us focus and have better conversations with our clients. That gives us a really good summary. And then it actually points out some of the ideas, actions, vulnerabilities that can be focused on as follow-up to that meeting. Saves a huge amount of time. You've got a summary which can then be put onto your fact find. And as soon as that, I know that it's in the process of them being able to talk to the CRM, which is where the delays typically happen. But once they've got that, it should pre-populate as well with a sense check from the advisor. It's going to remove a lot of those mundane processing tasks. It really is, which actually builds into where new entrants are going to come into the profession. If you can't have people starting out, sending out LOAs, chasing LOAs, doing all these really kind of quite labour intensive and boring jobs, where are they going to come in? So there's going to have to be a bit of a think around that aspect as well. But we're kind of keen to trial whatever comes out. Data security is something we are conscious of. So we do really check on where's the data held, who's going to have access to it, is it secure, has it been stress tested, or is it just the next kind of shiny thing that we jump on? It's like we throw the brakes on too often. If someone kind of says it's the best thing since sliced bread, you've got to question, is it really? What's the purpose of it? And how is it going to fit into our proposition and benefit our clients and not expose us to any additional risks? But I think it's just going to make life a lot more efficient is the overarching purpose I think we're going to find for it.
Yeah, definitely. There's obviously a lot of differences between financial advice and journalism, but I suppose there's some crossover. And in our company at the moment, we're looking at how we might be able to use AI, and it's similar. It's sort of, it can do some things very well, like it can find things on the internet obviously a lot quicker than I would be able to, for example. So if you want to start an article on something, it's very good for initial research. It does that really quickly. I've also found it summarizes PDF documents very well. But as you mentioned, Rob, you have to be careful what you put in it. So what I'm sort of looking at ChatGPT-4 at the moment. Obviously, I can't put like a report that's embargoed or isn't supposed to be in the public domain. Similar sort of thing. You can't really put client information into a public large language module like that. So yeah, I agree. There's similar in our profession. There's definitely some things that will be able to make more efficient, but luckily for us, it's not very creative when it comes to writing. So we're safe for now, as long as we are creative when we write stuff. Great.
I think just to jump on the back of it a little bit as well, though, Lois. Mm-hmm. I think as we scale, we want to be lean. We want to be a business that's not sort of restricted like a lot of typical advice firms that are, massive labour force, office space, where there's lots of these sort of remedial tasks that have to be done, and you have that sort of pyramid structure where you've got to be, a couple of financial planners perhaps, and then a massive team underneath them to support and kind of have to do that legwork. I mean, we've spoken about this before at conferences we've spoken about, but if we can invert that pyramid and say, right, at the bottom, we've got tech that takes off, a lot of that stress and workload to make our lives easier, then we can think about the talent at the top and have way more technical expertise in our business, more financial planners, which equals more going out there and speaking to more people and building those relationships. And also think in a way then, as a way to attract talent into the profession, if you can show that you're a business that says, I think about this, the first job perhaps that I had is those admin jobs. Like, well, I've just finished a degree. Like, really, I've got to come and sit and populate a fact find. Really, here's some meeting notes, pop that into IO, or you send these letters off and chase this provider every day. I'm like, really? That's not fun. So that's probably why there's a lot of turnover in our industry, right? Because there's probably so many people who look at these jobs and go, no, thank you. So, in a way, it probably is the next iteration of our profession, as it is for a lot of professions, where those remedial tasks that maybe put people off from even getting started are gone or, significantly reduced. In which case you can go out and attract amazing talent to say, okay, our focus in our business, new starters aren't dealing with those sort of jobs. They're dealing with, really learning how to do this job properly. We've got a proper training program that we've built for it. You're mentoring, you're shadowing, you're coming in meetings where the exciting bit is. And that's probably where you retain talent as well, because you're kind of skipping that first step into the profession of those mundane tasks that people don't necessarily want to do. I get they're important, but equally, I don't know, people, once it's gone, right? And Blockbuster will probably the same about Netflix, but it seems like the next iteration, and I'm here for it.
Definitely. Do you remember Love Film? I got DVDs delivered from Love Film at university, and Netflix did the same thing for a while, not as well. So I was surprised when it took off as this big platform. Anyway. Not relevant to financial advice at all. So, Scott, I'm going to ask you, because you've already mentioned it, consumer duty. So we did a poll on money marketing a while ago. Yeah. I can't remember exactly how long it was after the consumer duty came in, but I asked, has the consumer duty been a worthwhile exercise? And I think it was, I can't remember the exact stats, but nearly half of respondents, and there were about nearly 200 of them, said, no, it's been a massive waste of time for everyone. Would you agree with that, or would you disagree?
No, I would disagree. I've got two sort of reasons on this. The first is I have a fairly different view to regulation as a whole. I don't think as advisors you need to understand the regulation entirely. I think you just need to be decent people. And what I mean by that is just if you're actually delivering advice in a way that you think is to try to deliver the best outcome for what the clients express to you they want to do, and you help them and guide them, I just don't think you're going to fall too foul of any regulation, right? So I think the people that get uptight about it probably are. It's just a case of either they're not doing it, first of all, or they're doing it but they haven't documented it. And I guess that is the labor intensive part, right? Is having to prove and data points and so forth. And that can become quite labor intensive. But in the consumer duty side of stuff, I actually feel that I was having a conversation with someone else about this the other day, actually. And actually it feels that the FCA are fairly open to having a conversation with advisors about what does good practice actually look like, and not to go to this old school sort of rhetoric of tick box regulation, but actually, okay, we're open to understanding what good outcomes looks like for a client. And actually, it's not for us or the FCA to determine what value or a good outcome is for a client. It's the client determines that. And one of my fears with consumer duty was it was just going to be a race to the bottom in terms of price. But cheap doesn't necessarily mean great value. So no, I think it's a good thing. I feel that there's been a move by the FCA that feels like they're open to having discussions on what that looks like. I think if you're doing this anyway, I don't think that it's going to make any difference to how you run your business. Maybe there's a few extra data points that you're going to have to do, but once they're in place and set up, then it is what it is. So no, I think it's a good thing personally.
And maybe tech and AI can help with that laborious data collection and analysis. Great. Exactly. I think we're probably approaching the end of our time. But before we go, I did just want to ask each of you the same question, which is there one piece of advice that you'd give to someone looking at launching their own advice business? And Rob Schwartz, you kind of already answered this earlier, but I wondered if you wanted to start and add anything to your earlier answer.
Yeah, I think partnering with the right people, if you are fortunate enough to find them, is a really, really important piece of advice. And, understanding that different people have different strengths and weaknesses, and lean into that is probably where we've been able to make progress. There's no infighting here. There's no sort of, we should all be out there doing the same numbers of client meetings and, bringing on the same amount of clients and things like this. It's actually understanding that as individuals, we're all different and we all bring different strengths and weaknesses to the table. And it's about adapting and learning that and figuring out what works for the business, the growth of the business. That's it. And almost leaving your ego at the door and saying, okay, I'm not so good at that. That's great. But I know someone that is. And fortunately enough, they're one of the co-founders as well. So I think that for me would be the advice. If you are looking at doing it, definitely consider doing it with others, and don't be put off if that person isn't necessarily the carbon copy of you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Rob Bell, come to you next.
So I think what you don't understand is always scary. So taking that initial leap is scary. Something I found equally scary was the idea of kind of staying where I was, doing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And I think 10 years down the line, would I look back at myself and think, why didn't you just do it earlier? Why didn't you go for it? You knew you were capable. You knew you had the determination. Why did you wait? Because all you've done now is sold yourself short. So I agree with Rob's point. Having the right people around you is really important. I don't think I would have enjoyed it on my own as much as I have, but I think I'm glad we did it when we did it. I think if we were looking back in 5 years' time, I'd be kicking myself. We're able to kind of live the way we want to live and deliver advice the way we want to deliver it.
And I like the poster behind you is very apt. Do more of what makes you happy.
Indeed. Words to live
not
by.
That we're doing. We won't see this because it's not on video, but I promise you it's there. Cool. So Scott, what about you?
Yeah, so many bits. I think the largest thing for me, one thing that surprised me is how giving with people have been with their time for us as well. So when we had questions about things, and we've tried to repay that whenever we've had someone reach out to us that has asked about what kind of thinking of doing this, what are some of the things, we've always spent the time to do it because of how generous people were for us. But that all sort of collates into a piece of advice, which is don't have an ego. And what I mean by that is we set up this business from a blank slate and we thought this is brilliant. And then you put people through it and you realize it doesn't work as best as you are. And rather than sort of trying to smash it through, it's adapt, refine, admit when maybe things aren't going the way they are and try and figure out a solution for them. But don't constantly think that because it was your idea that it's the right thing to do. Just adapt and drop the ego is essentially the thing that I would say.
Nice. Maybe not easy for all financial advisors. I probably shouldn't say that. Not easy for all journalists either, to be fair. Cool. Okay. Thank you all so much for joining me. I've really enjoyed chatting to you today.
Thanks, Lois.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to In Conversation With. We do hope that you enjoyed it. Please do keep up to date with all our new releases via Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts from. You can also keep up to date with all our new content published on the Money Marketing website, as well as our print edition Money Marketing magazine. So make sure to subscribe. Follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. See you next time.